Super Smash Bros. Ultimate has a ton of extra modes aside from just the main Smash mode. World of Light, the Spirit Board, and so on are all fun, but my personal favorite by far is Classic Mode. This got a pretty large overhaul from previous versions. It used to be either a series of random fights or the same set of fights for every character. In Ultimate, they changed this mode so that each character would have their own unique Classic Mode route that sticks with the theme. For example, Kirby will fight characters known for eating a bunch, whereas Young Link will fight characters from the Zelda series. Many of these routes are incredibly creative and are executed near perfectly, however there are a few that have certain battles that don't really fit in with their theme. So, in this video, we are going to be going through all the characters' classic modes and saying which ones I believe should be changed and how. In addition, since all of these classic modes were obviously created before the DLC came out, I'll also say where those characters could fit in had they been in the main roster. Now, I play classic mode a lot. I actually speedrun it quite a bit, which I would say is fun, but that'd be a bit of a lie. Dude, please have just like a smidge more range. Bad Ryu and Ken. But since I do play it a bunch, I've noticed quite a few of these instances of certain battles not making sense. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like and maybe even subscribe, but with that said, let's jump right into fixing some characters' classic modes in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Alright, before we do that, I quickly want to cover where we'll be seeing by far the most changes, the boss fights. Currently, there are 9 different main boss fight types that the player will encounter in these modes. Those are Master Hand, Crazy Hand, Master Hand and Crazy Hand, yes that difference is important, Giga Bowser, Galleom, Ganon, Marx, Dracula, and Rathalos. Each of these sees a different number of uses. Master Hand is used in by far the most classic mode routes, making a total of 37 different appearances. Crazy Hand is comparatively only used in 2. Now that may confuse you all, so let me explain. If you enter either of these boss fights at intensity 7.0 or above, both hands will spawn. However, anything below that will only spawn the one hand I mentioned. That is unless you're in one of the 11 classic mode routes that will spawn both hands no matter what difficulty. Sorry if that was a bit confusing. In short, 37 use Master Hand, 2 use Crazy Hand, and 11 use both at all difficulties. That means that the hands make up a grand total of 50 final bosses for these classic modes. Since they're used so often, I and many others get sort of disappointed when they're the end of a route. They are usually used if there isn't another boss that fits. However, as this video goes on, you'll see that there are definitely some cases where the hands could have been replaced. As for the other bosses, Galleom is used 7 times, Rathalos is used 6 times, Ganon is used 4 times, Dracula is used 4 times, Marx is used 3 times, and Giga Bowser is only used twice. I should also note that none of these numbers include Sephiroth's route since he fights every boss in the game. 5 characters, Jigglypuff, Bayonetta, Terry, Steve, and our newest character at the time of making this video, Kazuya, don't actually fight a traditional boss and instead go against a fighter that's altered in some way.
Yes! By .18!
That means only 31 classic mode routes out of the current 82 don't use the hands. The other 50 use the hands in some way, and then there's the extra one for Sephiroth, bringing it to 51. So in short, the hands are extremely overused in my opinion, so we're going to be trying to change them out as much as possible. I mean, some of these bosses are barely used at all, and I think some more variety would have been nice. One final note is that I'm going to try and avoid fixing any to not have any bosses like the 5 characters I mentioned. I think part of the challenge is trying to fit in an actual boss, so aside from a few cases, all of these will still have a boss character. With that said, let's finally jump into our first classic mode that we need to change. The first 7 characters all have a classic mode route that makes perfect sense, which means our first stop of this video will be with Fox. His classic mode is called Spaceborne Smash, where he fights characters that relate to space in some way. The first change is that I think it would be better if Fox fought Meta Knight using his Galactica Knight ult instead of his normal appearance. It's fine as is, but I think it would have been slightly better if that were the case. The big issue here though is the boss fight. On his last round he'll fight Master Hand, or on higher difficulties, both of the hands. You could argue that they're space-like, but I don't really associate that with them at all. Marx, however, would fit perfectly here. I mean, his boss in his original appearance literally takes place in space. I'm not entirely sure why they didn't include him as the boss here, it just seems really obvious. So Fox's new route would be a fight with Samus, a fight with Cringe, a fight with Meta Knight now using his Galactica Knight ult, a fight with Giant Dark Samus, a fight with Olimar, a fight with Wolf, and finally a boss battle with Marx. Oh, and also there's the bonus minigame in there. I'm not going to mention it from now on though, so sorry bonus minigame fans. Following Fox is Pichu, which works well, but then we run into Luigi. Now this one is actually already great as is. His is titled Luigi's Nightmares, where he'll fight spooky characters. Now this is actually already pretty good, he even fights Dracula instead of the hands. In fact, the only thing I would change would be adding in some DLC characters. Now I highly doubt they'll change classic mode routes later on, so these are just hypotheticals if the characters were in the game by default. There are 4-ish characters I think could fit into this classic mode in some way, those being the Zombie, the Enderman, Sephiroth, and Kazuya. These characters are all pretty scary in their own ways, and had the classic mode route been made today, I'd imagine they'd make appearances. Now the tricky part is, which rounds would I replace? Since there's already a battle with 4 Dark Toon Links at the very start, I'll cut out the Link battle and replace him with Sephiroth. I'd also cut the Mii Horde battle to be a Horde battle with zombies and Endermen, since they are just basic enemies. Finally, Kazuya was a bit harder to place, so I personally decided to cut out Bayonetta. So the classic route will now go 4 Dark Toon Links on Luigi's Mansion, a giant Ridley, Kazuya on the Mishima Dojo stage, a Horde battle with zombies and Endermen, Sephiroth on Midgar, the Little Mac and Giant Game & Watch, and finally Dracula. Again, as I said, Luigi's route is already really good, this is just how I would change it with the new DLC in mind. Right after Luigi is Ness, however, his change is much smaller. This route is called Home to On It, where he fights battles reminiscent of Earthbound in reverse order to get back home. My problem is with the boss. This time around it's Master Hand. Now I actually don't have a problem with the boss being Master Hand himself, it's actually the stage I have an issue with. This route is very similar in a way to Donkey Kong's, which is titled Journey to New Donk City. There, he goes to many locations in order to reach New Donk City Hall. His boss fight is also against Master Hand, however to fit with the theme of the classic mode route, he fights them on the New Donk City Hall stage in its Omega version. I think Ness should do the same with his final fight, but of course it'd be Omega on it instead of New Donk City Hall. This is another one that surprised me that they didn't do, especially since they did it for DK. Since they didn't change any actual fights, there's no real need to run through the new route, everything else is solid. The rest of the 64 characters are good, so we start off Melee's characters with Peach. Her classic mode is titled No Damsel in Distress, where she will fight characters that have kidnapped people in the past. With a route like that, you would think her boss would be Giga Bowser since he kidnaps her all the time, but nope, it's the hands. Now the only issue with just replacing the hands fight is that she already has a fight with Bowser in round 6. Honestly though, that's not too big of an issue. We see with Sephiroth that they can just make the fight start out with having Bowser already defeated beforehand, so why not just lead off this round with the cutscene? It again seems really weird how perfectly Giga Bowser fits here and they just seem to ignore him. One other small change I would make is having the fight with Bowser Jr. take place on Delfino Plaza. Bowser Jr. wasn't part of the original Super Mario Bros. Of course, so it doesn't really make sense that his fight takes place on Mushroom Kingdom. So the new route would go Bowser Jr. on Delfino Plaza, Ganondorf, Donkey Kong, the Koopalings, King K. Rool, Bowser, and finally Giga Bowser. Daisy, Bowser, and the Ice Climbers all work, so Sheik is up next. Her classic mode is called Masquerade, where she'll fight opponents with masks. Her boss here is Master Hand, even though there's actually a boss that wears a mask, that being Galleom. Yeah, this one is really bizarre, so I'd obviously put him in instead of Master Hand. Additionally, with the DLC, Joker was added, who has a pretty strong emphasis on masks, so I'd put him in instead of the Hooded Little Mac. So Sheik's new route would go Meta Knight, Captain Falcon, Samus, Roy, Joker, a Mii Horde, and Galleom. That way, every character in her route now has a mask to help conceal their identity, because you know, that's what the point of the mask is. Zelda herself works well, so now we're on to Dr. Mario. His classic mode is titled Colorful Treatment Plan, where he fights characters in trios of themselves, which are yellow, blue, and red. This is to represent the viruses Dr. Mario fights against in his home series. The problem here is again the boss, though this one isn't exactly as bad as some of the others. While there's no boss that fits the exact colors, Marx himself is pretty colorful and is shaped somewhat similarly to the viruses. Sure, it's not a perfect fit, but I think it's at least a little bit closer than his current fight with Master Hand. Also, this next change is super personal, but I hate the Wario round that takes place on Luigi's Mansion. It doesn't even make sense. Make it take place on WarioWare or Gamer or something, because this stage is just so annoying to deal with while speedrunning. I can't tell you how many times this round made me want to snap my controller in half, so yeah, make this a Wario stage because that actually makes sense. So the new route is a Game & Watch trio, a Kirby trio, a Yoshi trio, a Wii Fit trio, a Rob trio, a Wario trio on Gamer, and finally Marx. Right after Dr. Mario, we have Pichu's classic route called Lightweight Fracas. Pichu's theme is fighting the lightweight characters in Smash Ultimate, since Pichu is of course the lightest character in the game. Now he doesn't actually fight the lightest characters in the game. He fights most of them, but he does skip around the list a bit. On this route he fights Jigglypuff, Squirtle, Game & Watch, Kirby and Meta Knight in a free-for-all, and Mewtwo. While yes, these are all among the lightest characters in the game, they aren't the exact lightest. Meta Knight is the heaviest character here at 80 units of weight, however there are 3 characters lighter than him that aren't featured in this route at all, being Pikachu at 79 units, Sheik at 78 units, and Fox at 77 units. Including the DLC, Sephiroth is also lighter at 79 units. So if they wanted to make this route more accurate, they would have included these characters in some way. I would merge the fights with Jigglypuff and Squirtle and also throw Pikachu in there, then have a solo battle against Sheik to replace Squirtle. And finally, I'd throw Fox in with Olimar since they're both pilots. Also, similar to Dr. Mario, I think Pichu could have a fight against Marx instead of Master Hand. It's fine as is since you don't really know the boss's weights, but Marx does look quite light, and for the purpose of variety, I think he should have been the boss here. So the new route is a fight with Jigglypuff, Squirtle, and Pikachu, then a fight with Sheik, followed by the normal Game & Watch battle, then it's Olimar and Fox, then a free-for-all with Kirby and Meta Knight, Mewtwo is next, and then it ends with a battle with Marx. Falco and Marth work well, so next we have Lucina. Her route is titled Path of Heroes, where she fights all 1 trillion Fire Emblem characters in the game. The only change that would need to be made here, of course, would be inserting Byleth due to him being an awesome Fire Emblem character added after the base game. To make room for him, I would combine Chrom with Robin since they're both from the same game, Fire Emblem Awakening. Since this is fought in reverse chronological order, Corrin's round would move down 1 spot to make room for Byleth to be first. You would also fight both male and female Byleth just like how you fight both genders of Corrin and Robin. So Lucina's new route is both genders of Byleth, both genders of Corrin, both genders of Robin and Chrom, Ike, Roy, Marth, and finally Master Hand since there really isn't any other boss that would fit. Young Link's is all good, so then we move on to Ganondorf, who I personally want to change a decent amount. Ganondorf's route is called Encroaching Darkness, where he fights against the heroes of some of Smash's different franchises. My main problem with Ganondorf's is the boss fight, which is against Master Hand. My problem with that is, well, Master Hand isn't really a protagonist. To be fair, none of the bosses are, and this could be a reference to Ganon wanting to overthrow Master Hand in Subspace Emissary, however I think Ganondorf's route should be one of the very few without an actual boss. Instead of having him face Link and Zelda in the second to last round, it makes much more sense if they acted as Ganondorf's final round. We would need another set of heroes to make up for them though, so I would throw Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong right after the Mario Brothers and move everything else forward once. Now those were the real important changes, but I do have 2 more that I think would make this theme look a little bit nicer. First off, I'd add Pythra into Shulk's round as he's the only one without a teammate. Secondly, I'd remove one of the 3 characters in the Fire Emblem round, probably Roy, in order to make every fight in Ganondorf's route a duo of heroes. Obviously, this change isn't very necessary, but I think it makes the route look a lot nicer. So his new journey will go Mario and Luigi, Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong, Fox and Falco, Shulk and Pyramithra, Marth and Ike, Palutena and Pit, and finally Link and Zelda as a final round. Moving past Mewtwo, we have Roy's classic mode route, A Journey of Swords. As the name implies, Roy fights characters with swords. The big problem though is the boss being Master Hand, even though Ganon literally has 2 swords in his boss fight. I don't know about you guys, but I think having the boss with swords in the classic mode about swords would just make a lot of sense. The rest of the route works perfectly, however if they wanted to they could add Sephiroth to the round with Cloud for a free-for-all, but again it works without him. So the new route would be a free-for-all with Lucina, Chrom, and Ike, Meta Knight, Link, Shulk, a free-for-all with Cloud and Sephiroth, a free-for-all with Marth and both Corrin genders, and finally a fight with Ganon. The rest of the melee characters, Chrom and Game & Watch, work well, and so do Meta Knight and Pit, which means it's time to look at Dark Pit's route. His route is titled Created Warriors, and obviously features characters who were created in some way. This time the boss actually fits well, being Galleom, so its rounds in between are what I want to look at. Personally, I would change the round with Dark Link into all 3 Mii fighters. This would just be a fun little reference to how you actually have to make the Miis, and I'm sort of sad they didn't use them here. Next up, I would change Captain Falcon and his Blood Falcon ult to just be Mega Man. I just think putting in an actual fighter that was created rather than an ult resembling someone that was would work much better. One final note, while I don't really know much about Final Fantasy, I'm pretty sure Sephiroth would fit better here than Cloud. I know that Cloud does work from the little knowledge I do have, but I'm pretty sure Sephiroth may be better. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I'm going to replace him with Sephiroth for this. So the new route would be Mewtwo, Dark Samus, the Miis, Sephiroth, Mega Man, Pit, and finally Galleom. Zero Suit Samus is up next with her route Grapplers, Whips, Claws. This has her go against characters that have grapples in some way. most of the time. She fights Yoshi at some point, who is here because his tongue kind of works like a long-ranged grab, but it can't be used in the air like the others. The more obvious weird choice, however, is Little Mac appearing in his wireframe ult. This is supposed to be a reference to him being made out of wires, but it fits very loosely here. What makes those exceptions weird is the fact that there are actual characters with grapples and tethers that weren't used. Samus isn't used, but that does make sense since you're technically playing as her, just in her Zero Suit version. That still leaves both Lucas and Isabelle, who also have grapples with the form of Lucas' snake and Isabelle's fishing rod. Luigi also has a tether grab, but we don't talk about Luigi's grab. So I would replace the 2 rounds I mentioned before with these characters. If you include the DLC, however, you have to consider Joker, Byleth, and Min Min, who all have tethers as their up special. Steve also has a tether grab, but we don't talk about Steve. I would combine these 3 with Ivysaur for a big free-for-all since all of these characters have it tied to their up special. So the new route would be Young Link and Toon Link, a free-for-all with Ivysaur, Joker, Byleth, and Min Min, Dark Samus, Isabelle, Simon and Richter, Lucas, and finally Master Hand since there really isn't a better boss. Wario is the next character, and again, I think we could change a few things. Wario's is titled,
I'm gonna win!
where he goes against characters that are strong and hit hard. The first change is to the ult of Ike here. For some reason, they have him as his terrible baby variant, but it would make much more sense if he was his Chad ult instead, which looks much stronger. And better. Secondly, the boss here should definitely change from Master Hand to Giga Bowser. Wario doesn't even fight against Bowser at all in this route, which doesn't really make sense considering Bowser is the heaviest and strongest hitting character in the game. To me, this almost comes off as this is what they wanted to do, but they just forgot, I guess? I don't know, it just fits too well. Wario's new route goes Ganondorf, Charizard, Buff Ike, King Dedede, King K. Rool, Incineroar, and finally Giga Bowser. Luckily for me, Snake and Ike's classic modes both make sense, so we're going to cover Pokemon Trainer. His is titled The Future Champion, where all of his opponents are Pokemon. While in a vacuum this one is fine, I think this theme is way too close to Pikachu's route. The Rats is called I Choose You, and has him go against all of the Pokemon. These 2 themes are practically identical, even their boss is the same where they defeat Mewtwo, which spawns in Master Hand. It's also important to note that only Master Hand can spawn there regardless of the difficulty. In my opinion, Pokemon Trainer should get a theming overhaul to separate him from Pikachu, at least a little bit. Since this is supposed to emulate Red becoming the champion of the region, it'd be really neat if after each battle, the Pokemon you defeated would be your ally in the next one, showing that you sort of caught it like in the games. I would also swap the last 2 rounds so that Mewtwo and Master Hand come before the other trainer. I think this would make much more sense with the theme since you are trying to become the champion here, so your last opponent should be the champion. Also, don't worry, a few other classic mode routes, Bowser, Mega Man, and Hero, have their boss before the last battle, so this still could work. Also, for some reason, Incineroar is on Kalos, since Greninja is just on the Pokemon Stadium stage, despite Greninja being from Kalos, so switch which character's on which stage. So this is how the new route would go. First would be a battle with Pichu, then it would be a battle with Jigglypuff with Pikachu as an ally, representing that Pichu has now evolved. Afterwards would be Lucario with Jigglypuff as an ally, then Greninja on Kalos with Lucario as an ally, then Incineroar on Pokemon Stadium 2 with Greninja as an ally. Afterwards would be Mewtwo and Master Hand with Incineroar as an ally, and then finally it's the battle against the other Pokemon Trainer with Mewtwo as an ally. While this does still fight all the Pokemon like Pikachu, I think this is different enough to make it feel more unique at the very least. Diddy Kong and Lucas have classic modes that work well, so now we have to look at Sonic's. His route is a bit confusing. It's titled At the Speed of Sound, and his theme is a mix of references to his games and the fastest characters in Smash. I definitely think they should just stick to one theme because having it be both references and just speed doesn't really make much sense. So I've created 2 different versions of this classic mode to fit closer with one of its themes. First off, if they wanted to reference Sonic characters, then I would change the second round. I would replace Captain Falcon with Roy Koopa and place them on Omega Green Hill. This would represent Eggman and his flying ship, and I actually think Roy fits quite well as an Eggman substitute. I would also change the Sheik fight to be Incineroar with his Big the Cat ult. I know that Incineroar is seen later, but I just really want this ult that looks like an exact copy from Big the Cat to be used. I would also team him up with the small Greninja to represent Froggy to further differentiate this fight. The stage would also be Tortimer's Island as there's a lot of water there. I also think his boss should be changed to Galleom to represent Sonic always having to fight against robots made by Eggman. So this new route would go Fox as Tails, Roy as Eggman, Giant Metal Sonic as, well, Metal Sonic, Purple Incineroar and Small Green Greninja as Big the Cat and Froggy, Yellow, Red, and Blue Kirby to represent Sonic Heroes, Giant Incineroar to represent that one red guy from Sonic Lost World that I don't care enough to look up, and finally Galleom. If they want Sonic's route to be made up of the fastest characters in the game, then I would have it go Charizard, Mewtwo, and Greninja, then Zero Suit Samus, then Fox, then Sheik, then Little Mac, then Falcon, and finally Galleom just to fit with the robot theme again. This would represent the base game's 8 fastest characters under Sonic, so it would make sense. Including the DLC, Mythra would need to be added, so I would probably combine her with Sheik in that case since they are right next to each other speed-wise. This list also goes from the slowest to fastest characters. The last two were pretty long, but luckily King Dedede's is a bit quicker. His is titled Royal Rumble, where he fights against royalty. This is another one that feels like it has a super obvious boss in Giga Bowser as he is the king of the Koopas, but no, they instead went with Master Hand again. Hopefully you all are starting to understand why the hands are so annoying as a final boss. In order to make Giga Bowser work, I'm going to be shuffling around the last few rounds here. First off, I'd remove Bowser from the round with him and Jr. Then I would move Ganondorf back a spot in order to give Bowser Jr. the penultimate round. So this new route would go King K. Rool, Marth and Roy, Zelda, Peach and Daisy, Ganondorf, Bowser Jr., and end on Giga Bowser. Olimar and Lucario's both make sense, which brings us to Rob with his route Unreadable Expressions. In this route, he goes against characters that don't have readable faces or are generally expressionless. The only match I would change would be Wii Fit. Before Ultimate released, it was pointed out that Wii Fit Trainer specifically was made more expressive, so their presence here doesn't really make too much sense. I would replace them with a Mii Horde wearing different masks. This new route would go Meta Knight, Dark Samus, a Game & Watch Horde, Little Mac, a Mii Horde, a Rob Horde, and finally Galleom. Toon Link and Wolf both work, even though I hate Toon Links coming from a speedrun perspective.
Dude, they bombed me! I am your teammate! Dude! Where were they bombing me from?
That means we get to move on to the Smash 4 newcomers with Villager. His is titled Mistake to Underestimate, where he goes against opponents that don't really seem like fighters. The first change I would make is to the Pokemon Trainer round. I would make that either just Squirtle or maybe Pichu instead. Ivysaur and Charizard both definitely look like fighters, so them being here doesn't really fit too much. I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be a reference to how Red doesn't look suited for fighting, but I think the reference would be smoother if it was someone else. The second thing annoys me to no end, because this route seems absolutely perfect for Marx as a boss, but it's just Master Hand. I mean, in the Kirby titles, Marx is supposed to come off as friendly and someone who isn't a fighter before betraying Kirby and becoming a god, which is pretty much this exact theme. I mean, they even have a cutscene of Marx looking innocent before transforming. It just works way too well. So this new route would be a Villager Horde, Squirtle, Ness and Lucas, Dr. Mario, both Wii Fit trainers, Isabelle, and finally Marx. Mega Fit Trainer and Wii Man both work, but Little Max is a different story. His is titled Friendly Sparring, where he goes against characters that fight close range. Unfortunately, this is another one that's incredibly close to a different one, in this case Captain Falcon. His is titled Up Close and Personal, where he once again fights characters that are close ranged. I decided to completely overhaul Little Max into something completely different. This would feature all of the characters with more than 2 jumps in order to reference how Mac isn't an air fighter and is usually at a disadvantage in all of his games. This route would go Ridley, Pit and Dark Pit, Charizard, Jigglypuff, Banjo, a free-for-all with Kirby, King Dedede, and Meta Knight, and ending on Rathalos since he has wings. I thought Marx would be way too annoying to fight due to him mostly being in the air, whereas Rathalos is mostly on the ground, so I think he works much better as a boss for Little Mac. Greninja's is titled Your Turn, Greninja. First off, I know the name is based on what's said when switching Pokemon, but this title still feels really lame. Luckily, the theme is pretty good, where each fight he goes against a Pokemon teamed with another fighter that would be the same type as them, so Charizard is with Bowser for fire, and so on. The only Pokemon to not get a teammate was Ivysaur, because there really wasn't any other character that could fit grass. Kind of. I think they could have maybe stretched it and had Olimar here because of the Pikmin, but luckily Piranha Plant was added and he fits much better as a grass type. The last thing I would change is the boss fight. Right now it's Master Hand, but I think they could have been a bit more creative here. Since Incineroar isn't used in the route at all, maybe he could be teamed with Dracula to represent Dark type. This would be an incredibly unique boss and would make this route stick out much more. This means it would now go Charizard and Bowser for Fire type, Pikachu, Pichu, and Zero Suit Samus for Electric type, Lucario, Ryu, and Ken for Fighting type, Ivysaur and Piranha Plant for Grass type, Mewtwo, Ness, and Lucas for Psychic type, Squirtle and Greninja for Water type, and finally Incineroar and Dracula for Dark type. Fair and Balanced Classic Mode is up next. Hers is titled A Little Divine Intervention, where she goes and fights characters that live in universes which have strong emphasis on religion. With that being the theme, I'm really surprised that her boss is Master Hand because it could really be Ganon or Dracula. But yeah, I'm going to go with Dracula since he appears less in the routes we've created, meaning this will now go Link and Zelda, Cloud, Simon and Richter, Shulk, Bayonetta, a Pit and Dark Pit Horde, and a boss fight with Dracula. Pac-Man's is great, so moving on to Robin, and this one is actually pretty decent as it is. Theirs is titled Thunder and Flames, where they have to fight pairs of fighters, one representing Thunder and the other representing Flames. First off, I'd personally prefer if the last round wasn't against the opposite gender Robin, because I'd rather it stick with its theme of duos the whole time. I would choose Falco for Electric and Young Link for Fire, as both of their neutral specials have those effects. The boss is something I would also change, however not exactly how you may think. His current fight is Master Hand, and while Ganon, Dracula, and Giga Bowser could all work here due to each of them having fire and electric attacks, I'm actually going to be sticking with the hands this time. This is one of those instances where the hands actually do fit, as they both have fire and electric attacks. However, I would make the fight against both of them. Since the whole theme is in pairs, it would just make sense for this to be one of the classic mode routes where both spawn regardless of difficulty. So the new route would go Pichu and Charizard, Sirius, Samus and Roy, Pikachu and Incineroar, Rob and Ken, Dr. Mario and Bowser, Falco and Young Link, and finally Master Hand and Crazy Hand. Shulk has a quick change. His is titled Witness the Monado's Power, where he goes against opponents which all represent each Monado art. I'm a huge fan of this theme and it's executed very well. The only change I would make would be turning the boss from Master Hand to Galleom to represent Metal Face, though what they have now is okay. The updated route goes Falco for Jump, Sonic for Speed, Giant K. Rool for Shield, Cloud for Buster, Little Mac for Smash, the Monado art, not like Dry Bones for Smash, Mega Man for the Monado Enchant, which isn't in Smash but it is in Xenoblade, and finally Galleom for Metal Face. We finally get a sizable gap of characters that work well with us running right past Bowser Jr., Duck Hunt, Ryu, and Ken. Cloud's route is titled A Ride, Not Interested, where he fights characters on vehicles. The only change I would make would again be to the boss. I would switch out Master Hand for Galleom because he has a few moves where he will jet off screen that kind of look like a vehicle. Honestly, that's a bit of a stretch and the hands work fine, but I don't know, I think this fits slightly better. So the new route goes Toon Link on Spirit Train, Fox and Falco on Corneria, Meta Knight on the Halberd, Mario, Peach, and Yoshi on Rainbow Cruise, Captain Falcon on Big Blue, Wolf on Lilat, and finally Galleom. Lucky for me, we now have an even bigger gap with Corrin and Bayonetta being good to close out Smash 4, and for our ultimate characters, Inkling, Ridley, and Simon also work. Richter is our first from Ultimate to require any change. His classic mode is titled Smash Echoes, where he obviously fights all the Echo Fighters in Smash Ultimate. Now I know this may seem weird, but this is one case where I think Crazy Hand should absolutely be the boss. He's the closest boss character to being an echo of another, so it would just make sense if he ended this route. Yes, the hands are oversaturated, but this is one time I really can't justify it being anyone else. I do think they could go for making it slightly more unique though. Earlier we saw in Pikachu and Pokemon Trainer's route that they had you defeat a fighter before it spawned in just one of the hands. I think it would be cool if this last round took place on Omega Dracula's castle where you first have to fight Simon. This could also act as a small reference to how Sakurai said it's hard to tell who's really echoing who in the reveal presentation. After defeating him, it would summon just Crazy Hand regardless of difficulty. So this new route goes Dark Samus, Daisy, Lucina, Chrom, Dark Pit, Ken, and the final battle is Simon and Crazy Hand. K. Rool's classic mode is good as is, so now we have Isabelle. Hers is titled Best in Show, where she fights all the female characters in Smash. Well, she almost has all of them, she is just missing the Miis. I would move Sheik to be in the miscellaneous round so there could be a Mii horde filled up with female Miis of each type. Additionally, with the DLC, there are also 5 more characters that would need to be added: Kazooie, Byleth, Min, Alex, and Pyramithra. This is a bit difficult to sort, but I would put Byleth and Pythra into the big free-for-all so that there are a total of 8 fighters there, and also I would place Kazooie and Alex in the team round for a total of 8. Kazooie would be on the opposite team as she's also with Banjo, just like how you have Nana on your team along with Popo. Alex would also join your side as well. Min would join the miscellaneous round since she doesn't really fit well anywhere else. Now unfortunately there is no female boss, though I guess you could argue that the hands don't really have genders. Either way, Master Hand is fine here. So this complicated route goes the 4 female villagers, Wii Fit Trainer, Female Pokemon Trainer, Pikachu, Libre, Sheik, and Min, a free-for-all between Palutena, Lucina, Zelda, Corrin, Robin, Byleth, and Pythra, a team battle against Zero Suit Samus, Bayonetta, Samus, and Banjo and Kazooie with Inkling, the Ice Climbers, and Alex as allies, a battle with Peach, Daisy, Cringe, and Wendy, a horde battle with female Miis, and finally Master Hand. Man, Isabelle's is quite complicated. Luckily, Incineroar's is much easier to fix. His is titled Burning Pro Wrestling Spirit, which has all of his battles take place on a variation of boxing ring, with each character he fights having wrestling moves. While I could argue that Giga Bowser should be the boss due to him having Bowser's side special, I do like the idea of Incineroar's boss being a team wrestling match with Greninja against both hands, which is what he currently has. The only problem here is that it for some reason takes place on Final Destination instead of being on boxing ring, so just change that and this route is perfect. With that, we only have one more classic route to change, since Plants, Jokers, Heroes, Banjos, Terrys, Min-Mins, Steves, Sephiroth, Pyromithras, and Kazuyas all work. That means we only have the disappointment of Byleth left. His is titled A Heroic Legacy, where he fights all the Fire Emblem characters. Wait, this is literally just Lucina's classic mode again. I mean, if they were going to be unoriginal and put another Fire Emblem character in, they could have at least been more creative here. Okay, I'll stop giving Byleth shade now. To be fair, these fights are in stamina mode, and having them all on a team at the end is cool. But it's still too thematically close to Lucina's. As someone who has not played 3 Houses, the best new theme I could think of was giving them fights based on all the weapons they use. First would be a fight against Marth to represent the sword, then it would be Zero Suit Samus to represent the whip abilities of the sword, then it would be the 3 links for the bow, then it would be King Dedede to represent Amir, and finally the spear would be represented by Corrin. The next round I wasn't really sure, so they could just do the opposite gender like they did in Robin's penultimate round before we changed it, and then the boss would be Master Hand since nothing else really fits that well. I'm sure someone else could come up with a better one, but that's just what popped into my head. I just wish they made this route more original in general. Now I did say we only had one more to change, however we do still have 3 more that we need to make, those being for the Miis. For whatever reason they were not given a classic mode route, even though I think they should. Mii Brawlers would be characters with strong punches, so it would go Wario, Donkey Kong, K. Rool, Kazuya, Ganondorf, Captain Falcon, and end with Giga Bowser. Mii Sword Fighters would be similar to Roy where he'd fight all swordsmen, however this time around it'd focus on more unique sword fighters rather than just the more standard ones due to Mii Sword Fighter having several projectiles. His would go Robin, Hero, Young Link and Toon Link, Byleth, Steve, Sephiroth, and finally Ganon since once again he uses swords. As a bonus, none of these characters were really used in Roy's besides Ganon, so this would be decently different. Finally, I think Mii Gunners could be based on characters with metallic limbs. This would go Samus, Dark Samus, Fox and Falco, Wolf, Mega Man, Rob, and then Galleom. That route isn't as good as the others, but it's still better than nothing. With all those routes now created, I want to take a look back at all the bosses we talked about from before and see how much more diverse we were able to make it. As a reminder, before we made any changes, 37 routes fought Master Hand, 2 fought Crazy Hand, 11 fought both regardless of difficulty, 7 fought Galleom, 6 fought Rathalos, 4 fought Dracula, 4 also fought Ganon, 3 fought Marx, and 2 fought Giga Bowser. On top of that, 5 had no boss and Sephiroth had all of them. If we take our changes into account and also add in the 3 Mii's classic modes, we only have 21 routes fighting Master Hand, 3 fighting Crazy Hand, still 11 fighting both regardless of difficulty, 12 fighting Galleom, 7 fighting Rathalos, 5 fighting Dracula, 6 fighting Ganon, 7 fighting Marx, and 6 fighting Giga Bowser. 6 now also fight no boss, and there's still of course Sephiroth with all of them. While 35 of the now 85 routes would still fight the hands in some way, that is a much more reasonable number as now over half of the cast is a fight that isn't them. I think the bosses are the main priority to change in this mode for the next Smash game. Hopefully they'll keep this style because it's a lot of fun. Maybe they'll even be able to develop a new boss or two to fill in the gaps for characters that didn't really have great ones. But anyways, that's it for this video. I wanted to make a shorter and more simple video after the last one since it was super long. But this one also turned out to be pretty long since I just kept coming up with ideas. By the way, go check out that last video, it turned out really good. If you enjoyed this video though, I would greatly appreciate it if you left a like and subscribe to the channel. If you want to check out any of my classic mode speedruns, I always have a playlist at the very bottom of my channel. I also have a playlist for my outdated runs as well if you check my created playlists. But anyways, dry bones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.